Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with Emily Zacarias, who's running for Goleta School Board. I guess it's District Area 3. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I know Emily a little bit and watched her, saw her speak at the Labor Day barbecue. She really roused up the crowd, and have sort of followed her on social media and everything she's doing to run for this campaign. So this is going to be a great conversation. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling great. It is a beautiful fall day, the beginning of fall, and I'm just really excited to have a conversation about education.
Yes, great. So you're running for the Goleta School Board. So let's just dive right in. Tell me about why you're running. What are your issues? Why should people vote for you?
Well, I am a teacher and a mom. I have two kids in the district. My 7-year-old goes to Kellogg, and my 3-year-old will start TK next year. So part of the reason I wanted to run was just my experience educating my daughter during the pandemic. A lot of issues came up. That was a huge challenge for my family to figure out, how to best educate a kindergartner, because she had just started kindergarten, and we were just so looking forward to her first year in public school, and it just, it kind of got ruined. And so my husband and I really grappled with a lot of issues. I mean, she was learning her phonics on Zoom, and she wasn't into it. And it was really hard to get her to buy in the beginning. And so, coming out of that, I was really concerned with, some learning loss, and that she might be behind, and just got me really thinking about what is the most important thing about education, and what is a school district to provide, and how can we, best support our kids. And, just my background as a teacher, I'm a special education teacher. And I am invested in the community. I just know a lot of other moms and families with young kids. So we talk about issues all the time and how it relates to our kids' schooling. And so those things really helped propel me to want to be interested in. And I, no Luz Reyes Martin, it's her seat. And so I, also had a talk with her, and, asked her, like, is this, you're a full-time working mom, like, how do you do it? And kind of got her take on it. And she just had such positive things to say about her experience, and how inspiring and motivating it was to be on the board, and the rapport she had with the other members, and, that she was really proud of her work and at the school, being on the board. And so all those things put together just made me want to, throw my hat in the ring. Why not?
Great. I want to talk to you about your special education expertise in a second, but before we go there, you mentioned learning loss. And we know even before COVID-19 that we have an achievement gap, or I guess we call it an opportunity gap now, but we do have a gap in performance in terms of students of color and white students. And that has existed historically in California. It exists here locally. I think Goleta's that gap's a little bit narrower than Santa Barbara Unified. Goleta's historically had a really good reputation in terms of how it serves its students, but it is still a challenge. Can you talk a little bit about how a district acknowledges and recognizes and attempts to teach to everybody, even though we know that when kids walk into the classroom, they're all coming from different places and different backgrounds. So what can the district do to close that gap?
That's a really great question. And it's an important one, because I think there are a lot of resources, being thrown at this problem to figure out what the best solution is. There's a lot of different strategies out there. And you're right, the achievement gap, I can't speak to it, the numbers before the pandemic. I have a feeling the pandemic probably exacerbated it. But right now, just the testing data for the last school year, the STAR 360 testing, I think the kids of color were performing at like half the percentage. It's like 47% in reading, and whereas their peers were 85% or something like that, proficient in
Mhm.
reading. The gap is a little bit less in math. So, I think there's, a lot of efforts with the English language development, having goals that the ELD goals and, embedding that within the classroom instruction, but also doing targeted instruction in English language development for kids who are, have the designation of an English language learner, which they get when they're enrolled in school. If a person in their household speaks another language, they'll get that label, and they'll kind of be flagged throughout their school career to be tested year after year, and to see it as their language improves. It is something that's on my mind. I think there's a lot of intervention taking place, with the accountability with test scores. So when a kid is performing below basic or whatever, they'll get pull out instruction to go into an intervention program, and in grades like K through 2, third grade, where this is something like remedial instruction in phonics and just reviewing basic curriculum and how to sound out words and recognize words. So that is happening, and I think the schools are doing a really good job of identifying those kids and data tracking, giving baseline data and constantly monitoring. But is it enough? I don't know. I think that's a great question. I had a conversation with Doss Williams. I think he's so knowledgeable about, the things that are happening right now in education. And, he brought up the point about, just more minutes of instruction, get to make up for these gaps. And I think that's something that I would be willing to explore, especially given coming off a pandemic where there's already learning loss happening because of remote learning. So, and that's something you have to consider, with the teachers union of, these are extra hours, and who's going to do the teaching, and is it going to encroach into summer or after school or during winter break? And is it going to be an opt-in or an opt-out program? And I think he's onto something, and I want to explore more. My homework was to read the regional equity study or something. It was put on by the Santa Barbara Fund. And I just downloaded, it's like 180 pages, but I want to look into that and just kind of explore other options, and even maybe like partner with UCSB. Like we have a world-class research university, and, could we study this in a longitudinal study and really like target, specific skills and look into programs that really like tackle this issue, and like, let's do it.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is what we've seen, this cultural shift in recognizing that students need to feel safe in the classroom before they are able to learn at the same rate as students who maybe come from a different economic background. And I think there's an acknowledgement that, and of course, built into the curriculum is social emotional learning. And I think teachers are getting better at understanding their own implicit biases and how to respond to students. And I mean, I think one of the things that's really cool, and I think this is universal now throughout California, but Goleta has free meals all day, right? Free breakfast, free lunch, supper. You can eat dinner, and that is such a cool thing that, like, I went to Goleta schools when I grew up, and that was never the case. And so if you did eat for free, there was always sort of the stigma attached to it that, you were that kind of a kid. And now everybody does it, because there's no stigma. So I think so much of it too is just helping students where they're at, and understanding that a student whose English is not their first language, that doesn't mean that they're going to be put into special ed classes. We know that students are over assessed into special ed, and that's just a language thing. That's not correct for so many of the students. So I think that Goleta is doing a pretty good job in terms of recognizing that. And then of course with the pandemic, they were ahead of Santa Barbara in terms of reopening and being able to offer in-person learning. And they never had mandatory testing. It was volunteering, but you'd have masks. So Goleta is sort of a good spot, So you're running in District 3. Tell me about your district and kind of the region that you represent everyone, but what specifically what area are you in?
So yes, this is the first year that they're having district elections. If you remember, in years prior, they were at large, which is, nice in the sense that it focuses my efforts in campaigning on just the immediate local neighborhood I'm in. So this neighborhood, it includes it's Old Town Goleta, a pocket of More Mesa, UCSB, which would be the students who live on campus in the dorms. And they just moved in last weekend. So we had a big effort out there actually to get them registered right away, because there's an election coming up. We want to get them up on the issues. And then that downtown corridor of Goleta along Calle Real from Fairview to Patterson, up to Cathedral Oaks and to Hollister. So it's a pocket of kind of Kellogg School is smack in the middle. I'm in the Tree Farm community on Patterson and Cathedral Oaks. So it's that whole community. There's several condo associations in that pocket.
Yeah.
And they're, working families, they're young families, retirees, young professionals, middle-aged people. I mean, it's a great bunch of people. It overlaps with, I know Luce has a little bit of overlap with her, she's running for city council. So I've heard her speak, to her constituents in the area that it makes up, but it is a small sliver. And I actually have been having conversations with some people in the Goleta, city council regarding how many voters are there, because really it's the first year. And, Goleta's kind of weird. There's like the city council districts, the precinct, then there's like the trustee area for the school. Then there's like the sanitation and the water board. I mean, like it's kind of a weird map. So this is new this year. And I'm just jumping into this political thing, like first time. I'm totally grassroots. I have no background in politics. I'm an educator. So I'm really learning a lot really quickly, but I think it's fascinating and exciting. And it's really gotten me connected even more so with my neighbors.
Yeah, there's nothing like working on a campaign or running for office to give you sort of this real throw you into the deep end of the pool understanding of all the stuff that you have to do to get elected. It's not even about the skills, it's about running a campaign. They're two different things. Running a campaign and serving are totally different, so you have to balance both. Talk to me about being a special ed teacher. What does that mean? What type of teaching do you do, and how do you serve students?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that question, because it really, special education has been my passion. I mean, since 2000, I started working for the city of Santa Barbara with their adapted recreation program. And it's a unique program. We did swim lessons and adapted recreation for kids and adults with disabilities of all ages, all different physical, developmental disabilities. And so as a student at UCSB studying psychology, I was just really took an interest in, the relationship between brain and behavior. And so I really started over 20 years ago. And I went into teaching in 2008 because I just, I've always had a passion for education and youth, but I just really felt connected with just people with disabilities, because I just feel like I want to help give them a voice. And sometimes they're just overlooked. And, in the past, they've been institutionalized and hidden away. And, and it's only in the last couple decades that there's been just such a change and a revolution of like inclusion, and like these are human beings. It's a civil rights issue, really. So as an educator, what that looks like, my credentials in teaching students with moderate to severe disabilities. So these are things like autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, some learning disabilities, ADHD, ADD, behaviors, kids with, sensory issues in the classroom. And every kid that receives services from a district is going to have what's called an IEP, which is an individualized education program. And some people may know this term, and you may have a son or daughter who has one, and it outlines the services that a district is required to provide to your child by federal law. I mean, this was part of the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is part of ADA. And so I don't think most people realize that there are federal laws that mandate how we are to serve our kiddos with disabilities. So that is a layer of teaching in this particular field that I think people might not be aware of, but if just that element is different. But in the classroom, I mean, teachers are trained to differentiate instruction anyways. And, let's take your average third grade teacher. You have 25 kids in a class. You might have, a spectrum of kids. Some are gifted, some are, performing lower, and you have to figure out strategies to teach them all. And it is probably one of the hardest things about teaching from my own experience and from talking to teachers, is serving all students. And then, you have students with IEPs who need more specific goals. A reading goal, for example, maybe they need to, continue learning their phonics, but we want to keep them included in the general ed setting. We don't want to pull them out into a special day class, for example. So there's so many issues revolved around special ed, and I could talk for hours about it, but that's just sort of my background in it, and I've been doing it since 2008, and I've been sort of a de facto advocate, just because my own when my brother, my nephew, he had to get an IEP, he had to get assessed, and they're calling me and asking me how to, what does this mean, like, for a parent, like, oh my God, they want to assess my kid. And like, and then you're talking to now a school psychologist, and there's testing and a speech pathologist, and it's really emotional and overwhelming. And when there's nothing more personal than talking about your kid and their well-being. So I've become sort of people will ask me questions about it, and I really love to help people and how they can learn more about it. And I've read over people's, they'll get, here's the assessment. Is this right? Like, is this the, best service? Like, can you look over the IEP? And I'm like, okay, like, yes, I'll help you. So I think it's an important issue to highlight in this election, because I don't know if there's ever been a special ed teacher on a school board.
Yeah, it's a population that is historically just so invisible. We hear about the needs of special ed students when there's a crisis, when there's a change in leadership, when there are cuts, when there's a complaint or a problem. And that's not how we should be talking about that population. We should be talking about that population the same way we talk about any kind of population, because all of our students learn together, and everybody should be treated with the same amount of respect and attention. And it's interesting that you are a special ed teacher, because you're going to bring that voice and that perspective if you're elected, and you'll be able to have that kind of expertise. So I don't know if anyone has been like that before. Was there a moment in time when you decided that you were going to run? You mentioned a couple of times you're a teacher, politics is new to you. I can tell that there are certain people who are politicians, and then there are people who are authentic and real, and you come across as authentic and real. Was there a moment in time when you said, I think I'm going to throw myself into the limelight here and try this?
Yeah, I think it's funny. When I realized, when I heard Luce, our kids go to school together, and when I heard she was running for city council, and I thought, oh wait, she's not going to be on the board, so she's not going to run, because I've called her up, as a parent, like to say, like, hey, well, what's up with this, or having conversations, and then and someone explained to me that it's a district thing now, and it's like she's that's my district, and I said, oh, So I thought, I had a conversation with her. I had a conversation with my husband. I had some mentors that I have in town that believe in me and support me and know me. And all of them said, "Oh, Emily, you found that, this is, you got this. Like, this is the perfect thing for you, because you've always been an outspoken advocate for your students, and you have opinions and you have experience, and you're not afraid to listen, or you're not afraid to say how you feel about things. And when you see injustice, you go towards it, and you try to figure out why it's happening and how to fix it." So that gave me more confidence. And I think, yeah, I mean, I just sort of went with it. I, pulled papers and thought about it a little more. And then I decided, well, I'm going to, go back to the elections and declare my candidacy. I'm going to do this. And it's sort of a gut feeling. It was like, well, because I was wavering, and I thought, like, I'm going to go. It's that feeling that, the universe will speak to you and tell you, if you listen, which way to go, and I felt more leaning towards go for it than not. So.
Yeah. I know you're at the Lemon Festival this weekend, and you've been knocking on doors. You've been out there trying to meet people.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from people about what the interests are, or the issues or challenges or concerns are as it relates to Goleta schools?
Oh, that is a great question. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I have been out talking to constituents. The thing I just today had a conversation. I don't know how to put this. So I think a lot of voters of, in a certain age group are scared that we are going to educate their children in the area of sexual education. Oh. In a young age that is inappropriate. And to be frank, some of them think we are going to teach their kids how to be gay. Yeah. I've heard this several times. They're concerned with protecting a child's innocence. And they're concerned that we're going to, this is a literal quote, put condoms on cucumbers and show the kids how to do this. And, it's hard to hear that, because none of that's happening in the Goleta school. So we're a K-6 district. Yeah. There's a lot of sex ed happening at the secondary level, and we can debate that till the cows come home. But Goleta school district, it's K-6. So a lot of it has been educating people and trying to have conversations with people. They're scared. There's a little bit of fear about the LGBTQ community, and how, that, they somehow think it's this extreme, like drag queens are going to read their kids' stories in class. And I'm not sure where this is coming from. I mean, one could argue it's coming from right-wing media, and that's a whole other debate. But in our own neighborhood, I really wish, I would have hoped that our constituents would really do their homework and try to find out what is really happening. And I think there's also this fear of curriculum is being hidden away behind a lock and key, and we're sending our innocent children to school, and they're being brainwashed or indoctrinated. I mean, I've heard these terms, and it's really saddens me, because it's not what's happening, and it's an extreme view. And that is the issue that keeps coming up a lot. And then also the CRT issue, and about teaching kids about racial inequities, and trying not to teach systemic racism and these things like that. And these are really important conversations to have, because there's so much misinformation flying around, and these topics are really electrifying to people. They get them all charged up, and there's emotions involved, and it's our innocent kids we have to protect. And I think this is going to be one of the challenges moving forward in the school district elections, and is figuring out how to temper these debates, because we can't move forward if we're disagreeing on the facts.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good transition because the next question I was going to ask you about, or next topic, but just to address that, that's the culture of fear that definitely conservatives are putting out there as it relates to our schools. We know that there was a conservative effort to, put literature over at Monte Vista, which is the Hope School District, and that that wasn't like that was a Santa Barbara Unified book out in the library they were using. It was a graphic novel, it was a textbook. I mean, it wasn't a textbook. So
Right.
it was sort of taking things out of context. And we know that that happens in politics, and it happens with conservatives. It happens with progressives and liberals too. I don't want to just say conservatives do that, but clearly there's a lot of a deliberate effort to blur the lines to create fear among parents. And what do people do when they are afraid, right? Maybe they don't vote at all. And we know what low voter turnout means, and or maybe they just get the wrong perception. And this is not in the abstract. We're talking about this with you, Emily. You don't have to go there too deep. You can if you want. I don't know what your thoughts are, but we do know you're running against Christy Lozano, who's running for this seat, and she has a high name recognition, high platform. She ran against Susan Salcido unsuccessfully, and of course, she got a lot of attention because she ran. There was an effort to keep her off the ballot. They said she could be on the ballot, and it was a very divisive campaign. And now here she is back trying to run for Goleta School Board, and she happens to be in the same district as you. Can you talk a little bit about the politics of this race and how you're going about trying to manage your campaign, knowing that there's this conservative effort against you?
Yeah, I think I really took Susan Salcido ran a great campaign, for example, for county superintendent of schools. I think that sticking to the issues, just keep bringing it back to education, bringing it back to the kiddos. How can we best serve them and help them? I'm not going to go there. I think the opposition people are informed. If they want to research the opposition and my opponents, that's they're free to do that. I don't need to give those ideals and values any more airtime or playtime or exposure, because I think it's already out there. And I think this community, within District 3, are bright enough to see things how they are. And I don't need to involve myself in discussing the opponent. It's just it's really, I think, let's talk about the kids. Let's talk about special ed. Let's talk about the achievement gap. And I think if I stay focused on that, it's going to help me even win more voters, because I'm not into like the negative mudslinging. And I just think I would want to run a positive campaign. I want to just stay positive. And I think then people will see for themselves who's better equipped to handle this job, really.
And I'll since we want to focus on the issues, I'll ask you the question. Can you talk about the importance of diversity? And you mentioned critical race theory. They're not teaching critical race theory in 3rd grade. We know that. But there is a new culture of inclusion and diversity and acceptance, and trying to balance out education for everybody's needs so that not just certain kind of students' needs are addressed. But can you talk about the importance of recognizing diversity in our schools?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fundamental human right is to have acceptance of all human beings. And I think there's a misperception of some groups on the right that in order to teach about these important issues, it will take away from the reading, writing, arithmetic. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like let's focus on, academics, and when did we get so, pulled away from that? And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can teach and embed diversity into the curriculum. Do you know what I mean? There's a way to include important people of history that have made contributions to our society that are Latino or Black or gay, and that's okay. You know, it's you're teaching about their contributions, and it's not a matter of you know, derailing the conversation and to like force it down kids' throats. Let's embrace people for their contributions and acknowledge, you know, acknowledge things about our culture that, you know, embraces everybody. And I think there's a lot of hesitation to really talk about these and to frame it in terms of you know, left or right, and to infuse politics into it. But diversity is it's what makes us humans and what makes us unique, and talking about our heritage and you know, and as a source of pride. So I think that you don't have to ignore instruction in academics in order to focus on these issues, which I've heard from people thinking that, oh, we're going to, you know, go into this long-winded debate about systemic racism in a second or third grade classroom. I think it's an approach that the teachers have, is also how to ask questions and how to understand fact from fiction, and how to problem solve when, you know, we're talking about conflict or things you hear in the media, and how to evaluate those things. It's embedded into these conversations that are happening in the classrooms, and it's not separate from the curriculum, in my opinion. I think it's just a way, it's a way to view the world. It's a perspective. And I applaud Goleta School District for offering training in diversity, and that's something new there. I'm signed up to take it, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's like Allied for Alliance or one of these trainings. And as you know, the Just Communities, that whole thing, that was, I think they left. I think they're no longer on the Central Coast, and there was a lawsuit involved, and that heated a lot of, you know, that sparked a lot of debate. And I don't think it should get that way. But you're right. Diversity is one of the cornerstones of democracy. And I don't see any problem exposing our kids to what is their reality.
Yeah. And you mentioned media, national media, and that's so much of what the conservative movement is. They take the stuff that's happening that they watch on the Daily Wire and Fox News and One American News, and they get all fired up and they say, oh, that must be happening here, so let's go stop that, and not recognizing that this is Goleta, this is Santa Barbara. Just by definition, it's a liberal community, and those issues aren't happening in the way that they might see them happening on a national scale. Nonetheless, you are in that battle, you know, taking on somebody who's definitely going to bring out those issues. Let's shift gears a little bit, Emily, and talk a little about you. Can you talk about your background and where you grew up, and sort of how you got to be here in Goleta, and how you became a teacher, all that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Los Angeles, grew up in Sherman Oaks, and I moved to Santa Barbara to start school. I got, you know, accepted. UCSB was the only school I got into. I started as a psych major in '99, lived in the dorms, lived in Isla Vista, studied psychology, didn't want to leave, much like a lot of people that move here. So I said, well, I love studying. And so I took a year off, and I applied to grad schools, and lo and behold, ended up back at UCSB. I was admitted into the PhD program, actually, in psychology, and I really wanted to go into research and academia. And I was really involved with evolutionary psychology and social psychology. I loved it. And a couple of years in, I realized it was really the hands-on work that I was doing with kids and adults with disabilities that I was really the most passionate about. So I ended up leaving the program, but not without my master's. I wrote up my research up until that point. So I have a pretty solid research background. I mean, it's a rigorous program. And my advisor, Stan Klein, he's still there. I took classes with Rich Mayer, who's, you know, currently on the board. And I absolutely love that. I'm proud to be from UCSB, and I think it's such a wonderful university. And so that really, it stayed with me, and my commitment to finding the facts, reading journal articles, and poring over data. I think I definitely have retained that as I moved on. I traveled a little bit. I went, did a lot of traveling after I left grad school, and then found myself back in LA getting my teaching credential for through Los Angeles Unified. So I'm a product of the second largest school district in the nation. Yeah. It's got, like 750,000 students. So I went through LA Unified, got a great education. I mean, I stayed in touch with my teachers for a really long time. And then I ended up getting my credential through them. So because it's such a large district and there's such a high need for special ed teachers, they have a program that you can get your credential, legit credential, through their in-house training program. And I did that, started work 2008, a brand new school, it just opened. And it was an empty classroom. They said it was beautiful. It had like whiteboards and touch screens and it was a great classroom, but there was nothing in it. And I'm like, okay, so I'm a first year teacher, and someone said, well, you got to beg, borrow, and steal. So I'm like, what do I teach them? And this is a point, they didn't even have curriculum for kids with disabilities. For the kids I had, they were had severe autism. And I asked my principal, I'm like, well, what am I supposed to where's the curriculum? And they're like, well, here's some 6th grade textbooks. This is a middle school. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I remember sitting there, I would just photocopy and enlarge the picture of the Earth's crust, and figure out how to modify that curriculum so that, maybe my students could color code the layers of the Earth. And that is the funnest part for me, because it's I want to give access to that curriculum to kids that might not be able to go in depth with the text. So yeah, and I realized there was too much concrete there. I applied for a grant. I got a school garden put in. I was really proud of that. We had the mayor of LA come out at the inauguration. It was Antonio Villaraigosa, and it made the papers, and it was just a great school garden program. And I was all about inclusivity. So I invite the other classes to come. We'd plant, kale and broccoli and herbs and flowers, and it was therapeutic. It was for my students, and it got the kids together. And I was really proud of that achievement. And then a couple years later, got a grant through UCLA to do an inclusive arts program. And I created a whole curriculum for, music and performative art, visual art, and, just to allow my students to be connected with their typical peers. And then I, met my now husband in LA. He was a kids drum circle facilitator, and I wanted to take some classes on how to teach drumming to my students. Some of them, autism has a lot of behaviors, and sometimes they hit themselves. And I really wanted to channel that into no, don't hit yourself, hit something appropriate. And so what better way than a drum, totally appropriate to hit a drum, and how fundamental for music connects us all, right? So I met my husband, and I said, I've been really itching to get back to Santa Barbara. Do you want to come with me? And he said, yeah. So we moved here, worked a couple of years in Santa Barbara Unified, had some kids, had 2 kids, and that's sort of where I'm at now. And I'm really proud of, just talking about it now. I think, education is just something I'm passionate about, and I've met so many amazing people along the way. And I really look forward to the chance, if I have the opportunity to serve on the board, to, bring in more things art and music and inclusivity, and having, kids in special education working together with their typical peers, like it's nothing, it's just normal.
To be a special ed teacher, I would imagine it takes an enormous amount of patience, more so than, other teachers. And, you're dealing with students with autism and varying degrees, developmental disabilities. It takes a special person. I don't want to, I'd say an angel, but that's a term. I don't want to, there's a better term than angel, but it takes somebody with a heart of gold, I think, to be able to say, I'm going to devote my time to educating this population, because I think that a lot of teachers want to do something else. There's different kinds of rewards. Where does that come from, Emily? Like, what is it how did you come to the point where you said, this is where I'm going to spend my career? You could be a whole bunch of different types of teachers. You say you have a very deep research background. You could be doing 100 things. Where does that come from? Is that your parents, or what sort of influence have you had that said, this is the population I want to serve?
That's a great question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me. You know, I've just always stood up for the underdog. I don't know. I think it's just, I have a voice, and not everybody has a voice that is heard. And so I want to facilitate, you know, individuals who may be overlooked, and say, hey, over here, like, look at this person. I see you, you know. And I think that there's all kinds of lessons that can be learned from working. I've had people, you know, call me an angel, and like, oh, thank you for working with this population, as if like I'm, you know, doing charity work or something. And, you know, I don't look at it like that. I find fulfillment in it. I find gratitude and, you know, in these milestones that, you know, sometimes the progress, it's really incremental and small, and you might not even notice it if you're not paying attention. I mean, there are a lot of challenges working with students with significant cognitive impairments and disabilities. And you're right, it is a lot of patience, but I think one of the things that gets me through it and is working with a good team of people. And, you know, you don't really go into this job for the money. You just sort of, it's something, I guess it's a calling. I think having a sense of humor really helps, and being able to laugh. I notice over the years, a lot of people don't really know how to interact with someone with a disability, and they might talk to them like, oh, hey, like, kind of like baby talk, when, you know, I try to set people, or like, or sometimes be more lenient in terms of like behaviors of like, oh, well, like letting them get away with something that, you know, oh, because they're poor and disabled, like don't, you know, discipline them. And I'm like, no, they need to learn just like everybody else. Like, you can't, you know, hit somebody, or you can't do that. And there's a way to have that confidence to do it. Cause I think people are a little apprehensive about how to interact with this population. And that's what I'd like to just normalize and change, and just say like, hey, like, they're humans like us. Like, what can we laugh about? What kind of music do you like? And, you know, listening to I think, you know, having you know, my grandma married a musician, my mom married a musician, I married a musician. So music is a huge part of my, you know, upbringing. And I think, you know, that also is, if we can all agree on something, it's that music brings people together. And I do try to involve a lot of music making in my classes, because it releases joy. And that's also something that, you know, you can have any disability and you're still going to tap your foot to the beat, or enjoy the sound of the music and have your preference of music. And so that helps a lot. But it's a great question. I think I also want to share with the public of, don't be afraid of like how to interact with people with disabilities. Like, don't be nervous, just jump right in, look at them, just see them and talk to them. And even if they can't answer you back, you know, in a sentence or talk to you, but just acknowledge them, give them a high five, a pat on the back, and, you know.
Yeah, that's so important. So refreshing to hear, a good reminder. And if you're on the board, that's going to be something so amazing to hear that voice when appropriate, when necessary, on so many of the issues that come up at Goleta. Let's wrap up, Emily, and I kind of want to give you the final word here. Just talk again about, you know, why you want to serve on the Goleta Union School Board, and why people should vote for you. There's two others on the ballot, And then there's you. It's the first time there's a district election, and everybody's kind of wondering, like, well, what's voter turnout going to be like, and how do we divide Goleta into these districts, and what is it going to take to get elected? So just give you the last word here in terms of people trying to make their decisions on why you're the best choice for this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think one thing that sets me apart is I did receive the endorsement of the Goleta Teachers Union, the UTPG, United Teaching Profession Goleta, which was a clear signal. All the members voted who they wanted to endorse, and they knew I'm quote in the trenches with them. Like I know, I know what they're going through, and I will have their their interests also at heart, and I will take that with me to the board. I have 2 young girls. I think it helps things stay really relevant. I don't think, but aside from Luz, any other board members in the past, if they actively have kids in the district, obviously Luz Reyes Martinez has endorsed me. And so I think that should give voters some confidence. A number of other, you can go to my website, emilyzacarias.org, and look at my endorsements. And I've really tried to go in depth on the issues, and not just talk in platitudes or just generalities. I really wanted to give voters a little taste of sort of what I see as the issues coming. So I think that also sets me apart. And yeah, just I would just ask voters, if you're living in the area, there's a district map on my website. So if you're unsure if you can vote for me, you'll know when you get your ballots. By the way, they come in October 10th. So just a few weeks away if you're getting a mail-in early voting ballot. If you don't see my name on it, obviously that's, not in that district. So I will be really curious to see what the voter turnout is. So if you're in trustee area or District 3, vote for me, Emily Z.
Oh, that's good. That's catchy. Right.
That's thanks to Julian. I have to give him a shout out. He's he's been helping with my campaign, and he came up with that. And as we've been canvassing voters the last several weekends, he said, that sounds catchy. Let's go with that. So, and we'll be out tomorrow canvassing the neighborhoods. We've done a lot of work with the other Democratic slate of candidates, even though I will say this is a nonpartisan seat. Yeah. But I have been endorsed by the Democratic Party. And so they've got an amazing group of volunteers and outreach. So I've been doing a lot of canvassing with James Kiriakou and Luz and Greg Hart and Rose Munoz. So, and Ethan, obviously he's running unopposed, but he's out there walking for us too. So it's a great group of people. And I really hope, that we're going to have a strong showing on election day or early the weeks leading up to that.
Yes, once those ballots hit mailboxes. Yes. Well, Emily, I really appreciate your time. It's been great to have a conversation with you, get to know you, and I look forward to watching the rest of the campaign. And I'm sure we'll talk again before, I guess it's November 8th. And good luck and have a great day. Thanks for taking time.
Thank you.